Jesus of Nazareth is the single most influential figure of the first century, and perhaps of all history. Born in Bethlehem, a small town in Roman-occupied Judea around 4 BCE, his life seemed ordinary at first, but his teachings, focused on love, forgiveness, and faith in God, spread rapidly and changed the world forever. Jesus gathered a group of close followers, known as disciples, and traveled across the region sharing his message. He spoke in parables, short, simple stories that carried deep meaning. Instead of focusing on strict rules or power, he emphasized humility, compassion, and care for the poor and outcast. This was radically different from the norms of his time. The Roman authorities and local leaders saw him as a threat. Around the year 30 CE, Jesus was arrested, put on trial, and executed by crucifixion. To his followers, however, this was not the end. They believed he rose from the dead 3 days later, proving his divine nature. This event, known as the resurrection, became the cornerstone of Christianity. After his death, his disciples and early followers spread his message throughout the Roman Empire. At first, Christians faced persecution and violence, but within just a few centuries, the movement grew so strong that it became the official religion of Rome. The impact of Jesus goes far beyond religion. His teachings influenced philosophy, ethics, art, literature, and law. Ideas such as equality, mercy, and human dignity trace back to his words. Even those outside the Christian faith often recognize him as a central figure in world history. In the first century, no one else had such an enduring effect. What started with one man in a small province of the Roman Empire became a faith followed by billions across the globe. Jesus of Nazareth stands as the defining figure of the first century AD, shaping the course of civilization for the next 2,000 years. Marcus Aurelius, born in 121 AD, became Roman emperor in 161 and ruled until his death in 180. Known as the Philosopher King, he stands out not just as a ruler, but as one of history's great thinkers. During his reign, Marcus Aurelius faced constant challenges. The empire was under pressure from invading tribes along its borders, especially in the north. At the same time, a devastating plague swept through the empire, killing millions. Despite these crises, Marcus led with calm discipline and dedication, embodying the Stoic philosophy he admired. His personal writings, collected in a book called Meditations, were never meant for the public. They were notes to himself, reminders about patience, humility, and self-control. Yet these words survived, and today they are seen as a guide to living a good and meaningful life. He wrote about focusing only on what we can control, accepting hardship, and keeping perspective in the face of suffering. As emperor, Marcus tried to govern with justice and reason. He valued wisdom over wealth or power, and many viewed him as the ideal ruler, fair, thoughtful, and disciplined. His example of leadership has echoed through the centuries, influencing political thinkers, philosophers, and even modern self-help writers. Marcus Aurelius represents the height of the Roman Empire's intellectual and moral tradition. While his military struggles showed the empire's growing fragility, his writings offered timeless lessons about human strength and resilience. Nearly 2,000 years later, his words continue to inspire leaders, soldiers, athletes, and anyone seeking inner peace. The 3rd century was a time of chaos for the Roman Empire. Civil wars, invasions, and economic collapse almost tore it apart. Into this crisis stepped Diocletian, born in 244 AD, who became emperor in 284. His leadership transformed Rome and gave it a second life. Diocletian realized the empire had grown too large and unstable to be ruled by one man. His solution was the tetrarchy, or rule of 4. He divided the empire into 2 halves, east and west, and placed a senior emperor and a junior emperor in each. This system was meant to provide stronger defense and smoother succession of power. He also introduced sweeping reforms. Diocletian reorganized the army to better protect the borders and restructured the government to reduce corruption. Economically, he tried to control inflation by issuing a famous price edict, though this effort largely failed. Still, his changes strengthened the empire enough to survive for another century in the West, and nearly 1,000 more years in the East. However, Diocletian is also remembered for his harsh persecution of Christians. He saw the new faith as a threat to Roman unity, and launched the empire's last and most severe campaign against it. Despite his efforts, Christianity continued to spread and would soon rise to dominate the empire. Diocletian retired in 305, the first Roman emperor to voluntarily step down. He spent his final years quietly in his palace in modern-day Croatia, tending to his gardens. His reign left a mixed legacy, both reformer and persecutor. But without his leadership, the empire might not have lasted much longer. Constantine the Great, born in 272 AD, changed the course of Roman and world history. Rising to power during a time of civil war, he became emperor in 306 and eventually unified the empire under his rule. But his greatest impact came from his relationship with Christianity. In 313, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, which granted freedom of worship to Christians. This ended centuries of persecution and allowed the faith to grow openly. Later, Constantine actively supported the church, giving it resources and influence. He even called the Council of Nicaea in 325, where Christian leaders gathered to define core beliefs that still shape Christianity today. Constantine also reshaped the empire itself. In 330, he founded a new capital, Constantinople, on the site of the ancient city of Byzantium. Strategically located between Europe and Asia, it became the heart of the Byzantine Empire and lasted for over 1,000 years after the fall of Rome in the West. While remembered as a Christian emperor, Constantine was also a shrewd politician and general. His victory at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312, which he claimed was guided by a vision of the Christian cross, cemented his reputation as a ruler favored by divine power. Constantine's reign marked a turning point. He transformed Christianity from a persecuted sect into a dominant force and secured the empire's eastern future through Constantinople. Few rulers in history reshaped religion and politics so completely. Attila the Hun, born around 406 AD, became one of the most feared leaders in history. As ruler of the Huns, a nomadic people from Central Asia, he led invasions that shook the Roman world to its core. When Attila came to power in 434, the Western Roman Empire was already weakening. He used this to his advantage, launching raids across the Balkans, Gaul, and Italy. Cities were burned, populations were displaced, and Roman armies struggled to stop him. His campaigns earned him the nickname, the Scourge of God, reflecting the terror he inspired. One of his most famous clashes came in 451 at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, where Roman and allied forces managed to halt his advance into Gaul. But even in defeat, Attila remained a looming threat. The following year, he invaded Italy, devastating the countryside and forcing the Romans to negotiate. Despite his fearsome reputation, Attila was also a skilled diplomat. He extracted huge amounts of gold from both the Eastern and Western Roman empires in exchange for peace. His sudden death in 453, possibly from natural causes, ended the immediate threat of the Huns, though his people continued to trouble Rome for years after. Attila's legacy is one of destruction and fear. He symbolized the growing pressure on Rome from outside forces, pressures that would eventually bring down the Western Empire in 476. For the 5th century, no figure left a greater mark on Europe than Attila the Hun. Justinian I, born in 482 AD, became Byzantine emperor in 527 and ruled until 565. His reign was one of the most ambitious in history, as he sought to restore the glory of Rome while reshaping the empire for centuries to come. One of his greatest achievements was the Corpus Juris Civilis, or Body of Civil Law. This massive legal code organized centuries of Roman laws into a clear system. It became the foundation of legal traditions in Europe and influenced modern law codes around the world. Justinian also dreamed of reuniting the Roman Empire. His generals, especially Belisarius, won back territories in North Africa, Italy, and parts of Spain. While these conquests were hard to hold, they briefly restored Roman power in the West. In Constantinople, Justinian left a lasting mark through architecture. The most famous example is the Hagia Sophia, a massive church with a giant dome that seemed to float in the air. It stood as the heart of Eastern Christianity for nearly 1,000 years and remains one of the most remarkable buildings ever built. But Justinian's reign was also filled with challenges. The empire faced constant wars, high taxes, and the deadly plague of Justinian, which killed millions. Even so, his determination and reforms ensured that the Byzantine Empire remained strong long after his death. Justinian I's vision was to restore Roman greatness, and while not all his ambitions succeeded, his laws and monuments endured. For the 6th century, no ruler shaped the future more than Justinian. The 7th century was defined by the rise of Islam, and at its center was the Prophet Muhammad. Born in Mecca in 570 AD, Muhammad worked as a merchant before beginning to preach a message that would transform the world. At the age of 40, Muhammad reported receiving revelations from God through the angel Gabriel. These revelations continued throughout his life and were later collected into the Quran, the holy book of Islam. His message stressed belief in one God, charity, justice, and moral living. At first, Muhammad faced strong opposition in Mecca. Many leaders resisted his teachings because they threatened the city's religious traditions and economic system. In 622, he and his followers migrated to the city of Medina, an event called the Hijra. This marked the beginning of the Islamic calendar and the first Muslim community. From Medina, Muhammad built both a spiritual and political movement. Over the next decade, Islam spread rapidly across Arabia. By the time of his death in 632, much of the Arabian Peninsula had embraced his message. His followers carried it even further, spreading Islam across the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. Muhammad's influence was extraordinary. As both a prophet and a statesman, he shaped not only a new religion, but also new systems of law, governance, and culture. Today, Islam is the second largest religion in the world, with billions of followers, all tracing their faith back to Muhammad's life and teachings. Charlemagne, also known as Charles the Great, was born in 742 AD and became one of the most powerful rulers of the Middle Ages. As king of the Franks, and later crowned emperor in 800, he united much of Western Europe under his rule. Charlemagne expanded his kingdom through a series of successful military campaigns. He conquered parts of modern-day France, Germany, Italy, and beyond, creating an empire that stretched across much of the continent. His victories brought order to regions that had been divided since the fall of Rome. But Charlemagne was not just a warrior. He promoted education, learning, and culture in what became known as the Carolingian Renaissance. He established schools, encouraged the copying of ancient manuscripts, and supported scholars who preserved knowledge that might have otherwise been lost. This revival of learning laid the groundwork for Europe's later intellectual growth. His close relationship with the Church strengthened his power. On Christmas Day in the year 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans, a title that connected his rule to the legacy of ancient Rome. This act also laid the foundation for what would become the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne's reign reshaped Europe. He brought political stability, encouraged education, and forged a bond between church and state that lasted for centuries. For the 8th century, no figure had a greater impact than Charlemagne, the father of Europe. The 9th century saw the rise of the Islamic Golden Age, and one of its brightest figures was Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian scholar born around 780 AD. He worked in Baghdad at the famous House of Wisdom, a center of learning that gathered knowledge from Greece, India, and beyond. Al-Khwarizmi's most important contributions were in mathematics. His book on solving equations introduced systematic methods that became the foundation of algebra. In fact, the word algebra comes from the Arabic title of his work, Al-Kitab al-Mukhtasar fi Hisab al-Jabr wal-Muqabala. His methods allowed people to solve problems involving unknown numbers, a breakthrough that changed mathematics forever. He also made advances in astronomy and geography. His work on maps and coordinates improved navigation and influenced later explorers. Through translations into Latin, his ideas spread to Europe and became essential to the scientific developments of the Renaissance. Al-Khwarizmi's legacy goes even further. The term algorithm, a basic concept in computer science, comes from a Latinized form of his name. Though he lived over 1,000 years ago, his influence stretches into today's digital world. In the 9th century, Al-Khwarizmi stood at the crossroads of cultures, preserving and expanding human knowledge. His role in shaping mathematics and science makes him one of the most influential figures of his time. Otto I, also known as Otto the Great, was born in 912 AD and became one of the most powerful rulers of medieval Europe. As King of Germany from 936 and later crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 962, he played a key role in shaping the political landscape of the continent. Otto strengthened his power by building close ties with the church. He appointed bishops and abbots as loyal allies, ensuring both spiritual and political control. This alliance between throne and altar became a defining feature of medieval Europe. Militarily, Otto secured his kingdom by defeating rival nobles and outside threats. His greatest victory came in 955 at the Battle of Lechfeld, where he crushed a major Hungarian invasion. This success protected Central Europe from further raids and established Otto as a defender of Christendom. In 962, Otto traveled to Rome, where Pope John XII crowned him as Holy Roman Emperor. This act revived the imperial tradition, first established by Charlemagne more than a century earlier. Under Otto, the Holy Roman Empire became the leading power in Central Europe and lasted in various forms for centuries. Otto I's reign marked the beginning of a new order in Europe. By blending military strength, political skill, and religious authority, he set the stage for the medieval world. For the 10th century, Otto the Great stands as its most influential figure.